Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltiziak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look back at the Detroit Lions 2024 season. We look at some of our favorite moments and experiences. We get some insights from Detroit Lions play-by-play Dan Miller. We'll also discuss the second consecutive NFC North title, maybe hand out some awards, and finish up with what's next for this team. All of that and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is the Detroit Lions 2024 NFL Fan of the Year, Megan Stefanski, and you are listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is James Cook, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. James, good to have you here, man.
Good to be here. Gotten most of that sickness out of the way, except for a little bit of cough. So still hitting the cough drops hard.
All right, well, continued recovery is wished for you on that. Joining James and I is Coach Jerry Angers. He is a former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He was named Michigan High School Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He is now the Scouting and Training Director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, it's good to have you here too.
Good to be here to talk about the Lions.
Yes, we're talking about them in a way earlier than expected, but we are still talking about them, and we're talking about them in a good way. We want to recap the 2024 season, look back with what we experienced, what we predicted, and things of that nature. And so let's start with that prediction thing. Coach, do you remember what your prediction was for the Lions when we talked about this at the beginning of the season? Did you have one?
Yeah, we talked about it. We broke it down. I went by quarters, if you guys remember. And I felt that, every 4 games where we would be at. And my feeling was going to be 3-1 in each one of those quarters. So then we had that extra. Of course, I predicted we'd be 1-0 every week. So let's throw that prediction in there. And so I had come up with 13-4, and with that 17th game could be a win or loss, 12-5. So I was pretty excited about 15-2.
For sure. I think I officially said 11-6. I may have been, I was on the 11-6/12-5 teeter-totter there, just because I looked at how difficult our schedule was. James, what about you? Do you remember where you were at?
I think I wanted to go 12-5, but then I think I backed off and went a little conservative and figured that they would have one bad game in there somewhere and went 11-6, but I'm not positive in that. Regardless, they won more than I expected, even with the busted down defense that they had all season.
Oh, for sure. And again, like Coach, I think we were mostly on the 3-1 every quarter type thing. There might have been one quarter or one section where I was like, we'll go 3-2 in this 5-game stretch or something like that. And so that probably put them right about the 11-6, 12-5. Either way, James, as you said, 15-2 far exceeded our expectations. We did not expect the Lions to put up that many wins. We didn't think they would need to put up that many wins to win the division, but that's the exact number they actually needed to get, the minimum number, that number or more. All right, well, we're going to dive into that, but we want to hear from General Manager Brad Holmes as we get started with this.
Look, obviously fell short of the goals that we set out to accomplish this year, and it stung. It's humbling, but won't allow it to discredit all the positives that we were able to accomplish as well this season. Franchise record of wins, and another division title, and being undefeated on the road, being undefeated in the division, and call it what it is, a historically tight division race this year. So, and look, that's the whole organization had a hand in that, and I can't thank the players enough for all their sacrifice and strain and commitment and their response through the adverse moments that arose. I thought Dan did a phenomenal job having the team prepared. Look, 15 wins, that's hard to do in a year where you don't have all the attrition that we had to deal with to get 15. But on top of all the attrition that we had to deal with to get, I mean, that's about as difficult as it gets. So, that was a heck of a job by him and the whole staff, the whole coaching staff. You saw a lot of players make jumps and get better and continue to improve. So was happy for those guys. And look, our fans, they still, once again, they showed up and did their part, and they pulled their end of the bargain. Wish we could have done more for them.
So guys, again, Brad Holmes reflected on the season as a whole, and he acknowledged the disappointment of the early exit in the playoffs. And we've talked about this before. Only one team is usually happy at the end of the season, and that's your Super Bowl winner. There are some teams like the Lions a couple years ago who finished 9-8 and won that final game, who have a good feeling going into the offseason, even though they didn't make the playoffs. But most teams lose their last game of the season, most teams that are competitive or whatnot. And so that 15-2 record was pretty incredible. Let's kind of go off of that. What were some major storylines we want to touch on through this season? James, you already brought up the first one, which is probably the one that everybody thinks about right away, and that's the injuries. So, James, why don't you get us started on that and kind of what you'll remember about that and what impression that had on you?
Yeah, I'm just surprised at how well the Lions did despite all those injuries. If you had told any of us before the season how many guys would have been injured and how many games they would have lost, and said that the Lions had any chance of being better than what our 11-5 or 11-6, 12-5 predictions were, I think all of us would have laughed at you. Just given how so many of the injuries were just on one side of the ball. That was so one-sided. Normally they're kind of spread out. This year the offense was pretty healthy. The defense was just a graveyard at times of injured reserve players, and the just what they were able to do with that. We joked about the Legion of Whom and all the guys they brought off of practice squads and everything to just kind of get through a few weeks and everything. But it was a pretty remarkable performance by that defense to do enough to stay in games.
Well, Coach, James brought up an excellent point right there. We had these predictions at the beginning of the season, but right after you made that prediction, if I would have said to you, the Lions are going to lose Hutch and McNeil and Barnes and Anzalone for a little while and Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson. I mean, would you think 12 wins is even possible? And I know, James, he's going to say next man up, okay? Because that's his mantra. And if there's a roster that could do it, it's this one. But even still, the maybe Lions fans sometimes forget how incredible of a job the coaching staff did, Coach. But, all those names, I mean, you got multiple Pro Bowlers and all pros on that list.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think as we had next man up, of course, but I think the way the coaching staff adjusted each week by what they were able to put on the field was incredible. And I think that's one of the things people don't realize. All the defense and all the scheme and all the OTAs, that they did in practice and put in preseason with Hutch off the edge, with Davenport off the edge, with Pascal's inside, with Barnes playing multiple positions. And then all of a sudden you start losing these pieces. It's just amazing at what they did. And again, it's part of the game. But I think we had a total of 109 total games missed by starters. 109. Wow. That by far was, I think the next closest was 86 or 80, and I think it was the 49ers. But let's talk about that. 49ers had injuries. We had injuries. Both pretty good football teams. Both didn't have the same results. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, both teams were in the NFC Championship game a year ago, and the results on the field throughout the season went very different ways with that. James, what else you want to weigh in on the injuries and how you remember that or how that affected the season?
Yeah, well, I found this one website called sportsinfosolutions.com, and I was looking at and they did an analysis where they assigned basically kind of like a war thing for baseball, but for the NFL and players that were on injured teams, and how many players they had on injured reserve, how many points they missed out on because of all the injuries that they had. This was through week 16, so I don't think they updated it with the last 2 weeks of the regular season. But through 16 games, they had the Lions leading the way, of course, among all teams in the NFL with 158 points missed due to players on injured reserve. The next team, the highest team, was the Saints at 149, Browns 141, Buccaneers 136, 49ers 132. And then it pretty quickly goes down to like into the hundreds and below 100. So the Lions, that's through 16 games, essentially 10 points a game, a touchdown and a field goal.
That's very advanced analytics right there, but it helps paint the picture a little bit clearer, right?
Yeah, the Lions led the league in point differential already, and if you added another 158 onto that, that is crazy how good this team would have been had they been healthy, even a big chunk of the season.
Yeah, that those injuries, obviously, we know the role they played. We saw what they did, and I'm gonna pile on an injury thing, and it made me say a few phrases, Coach, a couple times. This team is better than I thought they were, and the reason I said that is there were games we had no business winning this year, yet we still won them. You know, I think about that Packers game when we had, I think that was the Legion of Whom that was out there, James, that game. And it was like guys who were not on our team 3 days ahead, previous, and they're running NFL live action, plays, downs in that game. And we're just holding that duct tape together to keep it from falling apart, to get through so they can get in the system more, so other guys can come back. And so the impressive coaching job, and again, the variety of players that stepped up. Coach, before the season started, we talked about the depth chart on this team. We talked about the practice squad, and boy, did they use it. And we probably had one of the deepest practice squads, we talked about that before, of any team in the NFL. But we have people wanting to come here, so it helped us build it. Those guys played a role that helped us get to that 15-2.
Oh, for sure. I think we were joking, all three of us in preseason or just before the season started, that we could have had a starting unit on the practice squad for some other teams, and I think that's one of the biggest things. I think the other thing too is for them, it tells you what what level of coaching is going on every day at practice, and there that when you get a practice squad player that can come up, 2 days or 3 days prior to a game and pick up enough of the scheme to play in that game, it's just incredible. And I think that's what your biggest thing is it's people that want to be there, people that want to show. Practice squad players are great to put out there because they're going to give it everything they got because they're tired of being on the practice squad. But in the Lions case, I want to be on the practice squad because I know I'm going to get roster pay eventually somewhere down the line after the way this season went.
For sure. And we also saw the Lions do something that fans wanted them to do a year ago, and they did on necessity midseason. They made a trade for a defensive end. And it was incredible. If you heard Brad Holmes talk about it in his postseason presser, he talked about how you just don't really comprehend fully how difficult it is to get somebody during the season, James, because even though the trade deadline moved back a little bit, there's still so much time to play yet that a team's hesitant to move on. But I credit Brad Holmes for getting the job done and getting somebody in here and not selling the farm to do it for the future. So he had that impact, but it was calculated.
Yeah, and not somebody who was just a rental for 6 weeks. Too. They got somebody who had a team option in there so they can choose to keep him next season if they want. So I thought that the draft compensation was reasonable for a player his level and capabilities, somebody who I think is still on the back end of his prime and has more productive years left. So I think it was a great trade. I know there was a lot of pie in the sky people wanting, Max Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, but those guys were going to cost first and second round picks. Whereas they got Za'Darius for a pretty reasonable haul of late round picks.
For sure. And again, that was something that they needed to do to keep things moving forward and to keep giving them a chance. It did pay dividends. It obviously didn't get them to where they ultimately wanted to go, But if he wasn't there, if he doesn't play that role, things might have looked different. They might not have won the division, right? They might not have done this or that. They may have lost a couple more games. So the injury thing was huge. It was a big overarching theme as the season went on. It just continued to go and go. But a lot of things were gained from it and learned from it from the coaching standpoint. And hopefully the fans appreciate how well this team did in spite of that, right? Even though that took place, they still set a franchise record for the most wins in a season. So let's talk about some favorite moments we have from this season. James, a favorite game, a favorite moment, and we can have multiple, but get us started. What's something that was one of your favorites?
Oh, I loved the Cowboys game, the Titans game, both of those ones where Dan Campbell in the second half did not take his foot off the gas and just, in games that were in the more national windows and just said, this is who the Lions are. We're coming for you and you better be afraid of us.
He did do that. I'm gonna agree on the Cowboys game. That is a game I absolutely loved. I circled that on my calendar, not just because it was Jerry Jones's birthday, but I'm glad we delivered him a present, a Detroit-style Motown present. 50 points on the Cowboys on their birthday. Like, that game had everything in it. I will tell you, I was just thrilled to see that game happen and it go the way it did. That was one of my favorite moments of the season because at that point, people still weren't quite sure what to make of the Cowboys. And so they still thought they could be in the running and for the playoffs. I think they had a winning record at that point. But the Lions went in and changed it all. That whole thing was awesome.
Yeah, the Cowboys game was where they did lose Hutchinson. So there was that bad part of that game.
Yeah. Yep. So that was a bummer part of that. And that was the beginning of the injury part. But putting up those 50 points on the Cowboys, that was an exciting thing. Coach, what's a favorite moment or memory you have from this season?
I think winning all of our road games, which included 5 interceptions by Goff. And my biggest thing about that was it showed me that we have a true team. Everybody will chip in to make sure win as a team and pick each other up. We win as a team, we pick each other up. Goff is having a game, and again, it's not all Goff's fault. It's not all this God, but these guys never flinch. And going on the road just shows you how tight they are because they come out winners every time they come back to their house.
Well, and you're right. That's what comes right back to Dan Campbell's mantra of complementary football, right? Picking up one side when the other side's not down. This isn't the first when the other side is down. This isn't the first time we've seen it. We saw it a couple years ago when the Lions lost to Seattle and Jared Goff said, I need to score more points, even though they scored like 40-some points that game. He didn't blame his defense. He said, I've got to do more because you've got to complement or help out one side versus the other. Coach, undefeated on the road. That is incredible. James, that just doesn't happen very often. And to have 5 turnovers and still win on the road, that was one of those games that made me think, where is this team coming from? How do they pull this stuff off? And it wasn't like they won, they threw 5 interceptions against the Carolina Panthers in week 5 and came back and beat them. Houston made the playoffs. This was a legit team they beat in this way.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of their maybe a more impressive wins of the season looking back at it. Just in that Houston was a pretty competent playoff team, had a decent showing in the playoffs before they stepped out, but and doing it on the road, doing it despite the 5 turnovers, all the picks, Goff's, I would say, worst game of the season. Unfortunately, his second worst was in the Commanders game. But yeah, that was just an impressive game. How they came back on the road. They were down at halftime, never gave up, came out in the second half, put some points on the board, got some momentum, and just went from there and took that game.
Yeah. I'm going to weigh in on week 1 and week 18. They were perfect bookends to the regular season, right? The NFL had us open up against the Rams and Matthew Stafford on Sunday Night Football, and the way we just pummeled them down the field in overtime and just ran that ball down and won that game. It was nice to, again, take the Matthew Stafford storyline, push it off to the side, and just get the win and not let people talk about it. And so that was 2 games against Stafford and the Rams in a very short amount of time, both at Ford Field. The Lions got the job done. It got us started 1-0. And did either of you guys want to wait on that? I mean, how important was that, Coach, to not necessarily beat Stafford, but to start the season 1-0 so you start on a winning note, not a losing note?
I mean, it's another one of those tough games. It's a team that's coming in, a team that can't wait to play us again because they lost to us the year before in the playoffs. We knocked them out of the playoffs, and I think those are just for us to come in and do that. And it was a home game, and we were ready to go, and we knew how good we were going to be because we didn't have any injuries at that point. And so I think that's huge, and I think we ended the season well too. It's just everything that happened in between was mentally challenging and mentally on each one of the players and each one of the coaches. I just think that's how the season turned out.
Yeah, it did. It did take its toll, and the weight, it probably pulled things down a little bit, James.
Yeah, well, and I think that game kind of helped establish the Lions' identity for the season. That overtime was the drive where they just pounded David Montgomery and that whole drive down the field and just said, we're taking the ball and we're going to go score a touchdown and win this game.
Yeah, they did. And you saw, not a surprise, but the impressive running attack of the Lions, because that's what they've wanted to do. That's what they've tried to do every year that they've been here. And Week 18 might be my favorite game of the season. That was the Vikings game where it was winner takes the division. And a lot of people were not high on the Lions in this game because the way our defense had been playing. Alex Anzalone comes back. AG schemes up an incredible defensive effort, and suddenly Sam Darnold's narrative changes big time because the Lions put pressure on him. They did not let him, make plays in the red zone. I don't know how many red zone stands they had on that, Coach. Game-changing, crowd-inducing. It was everything, and man, that game was a great way to end the regular season.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and again, we got. I don't know how much it took out of us, and I think what it took out of us, and I'll talk about it later. Is Meek Robinson, he broke out. He became the alpha male at corner for us, and of course, I got a little thing at the end that I want to bring up about all that stuff. But it was a perfect game plan, and it was to the point where I think AG had enough bodies in front of him that he could devise his defense with the bodies he had in front of him, and it wasn't guys that hadn't played or started for us somewhere during the season or had just come off the couch. So it was great. It was perfect, and it ignited us for the playoffs. That's for sure.
It was, and I made it to a number of games this year. That atmosphere was amazing. I was there for Buffalo. I was there for the Rams. I think I was there for Tampa. So I saw both sides of it, unfortunately, because we didn't win all the games. But that energy in that game almost felt like a playoff game, James, because so much was on the line there to win the division, to get the home game. Obviously, the playoffs didn't go the way we wanted, but that atmosphere, that game, that team was so dialed in, and it just one more great example of what an awesome season this was, because that got us our back-to-back division titles.
Mm-hmm. So let me recap. You were there for Tampa, you were there for Buffalo, and you were there for the Commanders.
But you left out that I was there for the Rams and I was there for Minnesota. I mean, if you wanted me to go to the Titans game, I could have, but we all know how that game was going to go.
I'm just giving you gruff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I went to, yeah. Yep. I chose the tough ones, man. And there were some I wanted to go to, but I couldn't get to, like the Seattle one, like the Green Bay one, Coach, that you went to. That was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that was one of my best ones because I went and my son went, and 5 of my ex-players that played for me at Traverse City Wes went, and it was just we had a great time, and I got down there early because I think some of them had snow days, and it was a night game, and it was perfect. And the other thing was two of my players, they were both Green Bay fans, so it was even better after the game.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But yeah, you're right, James. I mean, it was tough. It was tough that experiencing some of those losses. But that Vikings game was so much fun. All right, we need to hand out some awards. We should look at who do you think was the most improved player this year on the team? James, let's start with you. There's multiple candidates you could choose from, but who did you see was most improved?
I'm gonna go one offense, one defense. So offensive, most improved player would be Jahmyr Gibbs. Just developed into a workhorse running back if they want him to be. They still have David Montgomery, and they're still going to sprinkle him and use him a decent amount to punish defenses. But when they need to, they can just spring Jahmyr Gibbs on teams whenever they want. On defense, Jack Campbell, man, he was just what they needed in their rock all season. He wasn't bad or anything like that before, but man, he took a leap this year and turned himself, I think, into one of the better all-around linebackers in the NFL pretty quickly, especially after a lot of people questioned him being picked in the 18 spot.
Oh, for sure. Well, but before we go too much further down the Jack Campbell thing on defense, Coach, on offensive side here, James brought up Jahmyr Gibbs. Is that the guy you've got, or are there multiple guys, or is there just one, and nobody on offense that kind of jumped out?
Well, I think, definitely Jahmyr. J-Mo. I know you're going to mention J-Mo too. And I think Goff. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Goff got better. And people don't see it. Oh my God, he threw 5 or oh my God. You know what? It's about the game, and it's about what he can do for us. I can't wait to see him next year because he's going to get better next year. And that's what the Peyton Mannings, and I'm not comparing Jared Goff to Peyton Manning, but how long did it take Peyton Manning to win a Super Bowl? How long did it take John Elway to win a Super Bowl? All right, guys, and that's the thing you got to look at with Jared Goff and the stuff he did and spread it around and getting people in it. So I'm going to go with them. And defense wise, I'm going to go.
Hold on the defense. Let's attack the offense first. Coach, I'm gonna fully admit Jared Goff was not on my radar for this, but you are absolutely right. He had the highest rating of his career, 111. He had more touchdowns this season thrown than he has ever thrown in his entire career, 37. Okay? He threw for 4,629 yards. There are 2 other years in his career where he threw for 4,600 yards, and those were 2018 and 2019 with the Rams, one of which years he did take the team to the Super Bowl with them. So he had an incredibly, successful season. And last year was already good with 30 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And, James, I don't know if this matters a whole lot, but he rushed for 56 yards this year, which the year before only 21 yards. Okay. Now, this doesn't hit his record high. He did rush for 108 back in the day, but 56 compared to 21, a little bit of improvement there. And here's the thing. You don't want it to be too much because his first year with the Lions, he ran for 87 yards, but he was running for his life a lot of that time. So we don't want that going on too much. But Coach, you're absolutely right because you've already heard the questioning after that playoff game. And, they lost as a complimentary team because multiple facets didn't work. But Jared Goff had a sensational season. And when you look at these stats, it really jumps out to you and you're like, wow, it's one of the best seasons a Detroit Lions quarterback has had. And it's the best season Jared Goff has ever had. And we remember how well he played last year. So on the offensive side, yeah, Jared Goff should be in that conversation. Yet you brought up Jahmyr Gibbs. James, you said it. He has exploded. You brought up the draft position of Jack Campbell. Bring it up of Jahmyr Gibbs, right? We don't have to go revisionist history on nothing. We can just put the facts out there. Multiple people have said, hey, the running back is more valuable than people thought it was 2 years ago. Fortunately, Dan Campbell saw that and has always known that and that's been his thing. And so, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, rushing, incredible stats on the season. So let me bring those up right here for some reason the postseason part came up. But 1,400 yards rushing, 5.6 a carry, 16 touchdowns. He broke the touchdown record held by Barry Sanders for the most touchdowns in a season. And so, yeah. And then, Coach, you brought up J-Mo. The evolution, right? He had 1,000 yards this season. You know, that did so many things for the offense. And he wasn't just a deep threat. We saw him develop James, making some of those catches over the middle as well.
Yeah, he was definitely a huge part of the offense. You know, he did have a few plays where, you know, the interception against the Commanders, maybe he should have not thrown that, you know, and then he had a couple off the field things and stuff, but his on the field game this year definitely took a big leap forward for sure. And he provided what we had talked about for a couple years, you know, that burner that other teams have to respect, have to have an extra safety to account for, and takes another guy away from Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta on a regular basis. One of those guys you're not going to be able to double all those guys. So that's going to leave one of them in single coverage at least.
Yeah. Coach, before we get to defense there, you know, those are probably the big three guys as far as showing improvement. We obviously have a lot of study players, and some of them might come up with our MVP or our most valuable player talk. But, you know, the evolution, the improvement by these guys just fueled the offense to a different level, and that's part of the reason the Lions were so successful.
Oh, that's for sure. And I think, you know, Holmes is building the team through the draft. And if we look at the last 3 drafts or even last 4 drafts, how those guys each year have taken that next step to be better and what they've seen. So you take that, you take the growth of those young guys this year, and it's going to be magnified next year of the growth. It's just going to be magnified. And I think that's the thing is people don't realize that. Oh my God, this is it. You know, I can't believe I'm hearing our window is closed. What is that? I don't even know what that means anymore.
I think I know what it means. I think it means some people are not happy with winter, and they're turning up the heat and closing their windows. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Chiefs windows closing after they win, if they win the 3rd Super Bowl, but whatever. And so I think that's the biggest thing with these guys is they just, you know, they continue to grow, continue to get better, and we keep putting more on their plate. And that's the J-Mo got more on his plate. He wasn't just the takeoff guy. You know, Gibbs got more on his plate. You know, he was running in between the tackles. He's running outside tackles. He's catching passes. He's blocking. And you know, and that comes from Monty teaching him that. That comes from St. Brown teaching J-Mo that. I love this team. I'm sorry.
Please don't apologize, man, because this team is incredible. And we'll even get to more of that as we go on. So, all right. James brought up Jack Campbell on defense. Huge improvement. I second that, James. We saw a big growth from him. Coach, where did you want to go on defense?
Well, I agree with him on that. You know, he played out of position for 6 games, 7 games, right? He was the green dot. You don't tell me that's not going to carry over till next year with him and Anzalone. Now you got 2 green dots basically on the field. And so, yeah, I'm going to agree with the Campbell one wholeheartedly. And I think you got to also look at that safety, you know, not Joseph as much because we knew what he was all about, but Branch. You know, Branch, I think he had the most PBUs. I mean, there was, again, there's so many records, guys. I started losing my mind trying to look at all.
Right.
To be honest with you. But when you look at what he did and he's not getting any accolades, and then he comes, then what does he do? Then they throw him back down into the box, you know, because we lost a player. I don't want to say, I can't wait till next year. I can't wait till next year when the whole team's here and knock on wood, we can't have all these injuries on defense. We better not have any injuries on offense. But those guys, when you talk about that with Campbell and Branch, and then you just add them all in. And, you know, the rookie Arnold improved all year long. Yeah, nobody's going to say he did, but and he already came out and said he's going to be the best corner in the league next year. Can't wait.
Well, yeah, you're right. And people saw the steady growth on him. Yes. I think most people would agree, you know, compared to the first 5 or 6 weeks, the rest of the way. And again, I think you're right, though, Coach. A lot of people overreacted early to him and were trying to label him, and it wasn't accurate. But Jack Campbell, 131 tackles. He led the team in tackles this year. Brian Branch, the other guy you brought up, 109. And some might say, well, how is he most improved? Well, he switched positions. He went from being nickel to safety, and he did it even better, maybe. And then, like you said, they brought him back at times. Kirby Joseph might not be the most improved. He might be the most bounce back player from last year, because the year before he was rather solid. And then some people thought he took a step backwards last year. And then this year he just re-elevated to a different level. So we had a lot of great contributions on defense there, James.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you could go. I mean, you could even mention Carlton Davis. I think, and not that he was necessarily improved over last year, but he improved the defense. So I think I'll get back to him a little bit in the next little category.
Sounds good. And, Aleem McNeil was becoming a force before he got injured. And so, some might even argue that was the last injury that really decimated us, because that really affected the 4-person pass rush without having to bring the extra people and whatnot. So, all right, we talked about improved people, but there are some people that were just valuable to this team. And maybe it is one of the most improved people. I'm going to choose this person only because I don't want to go the whole show without talking about him, because that would just be wrong. And sometimes you forget about him because he's just so consistently good. And that is Amon-Ra St. Brown. The man had 1,263 yards on 115 catches with 12 touchdowns. Oh, by the way, as we already alluded to earlier, he also threw a touchdown pass. He has a quarterback rating of a 135.4 on that one pass. But Amon-Ra St. Brown just shows up to work and outworks you most of the time, if not all of the time. And it's hard to say there is an MVP, because I feel like the MVP is a collective for this one coach. But Amon-Ra St. Brown embodies everything that it's about. And so that's why I went with him for the MVP. Did you have somebody that you would kind of put out there?
No, it's so hard to choose that because of everything that they've done and how consistent they are and how deep we are at those skill positions as well as the leadership position. And, you can say Sewell. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many guys you can pull Rags in there, because that's the bread and butter of our offense. It's the offensive line. That's what we drafted to start. And so we embodied that. Dan Campbell and the staff said, we want 5 dogs up front. That way we can have 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers with 1,000 scrimmage yards, and score, was it 70 touchdowns, you guys? So, that's a big thing from that. So, I just think his leadership, you can go on and on. That's a nice thing to have. I'm glad I'm not picking these with this team. If I was the head coach right now, because I'd say I did it a few times that when I coached, and I ended up giving, 4 of the same award out because I didn't want to slight anybody, because it wasn't like that one person was even better than the other. And that's what this team is all about.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of call it a collective, because even though I said St. Brown, and I'm just doing that so we actually mentioned his name on this show because of all that he's done. But you're right. It's such a group effort. James, I know you've got some options out there.
Yeah, well, I think St. Brown's a great call. I mean, he is just Mr. Dependable. He does everything that you want a wide receiver to do. The only thing that you could probably ever knock on him as a wide receiver is that he's not 6'3". Like, that's it. He does everything else that you want a wide receiver. He runs perfect routes. He has great hands. He very, very rarely drops the ball. He blocks, like you wouldn't believe for a wide receiver. He's a leader too, a leader by example, and a pretty vocal leader on this team. So I think he's a good choice there. Goff, obviously, we've talked about him. Could be one if a lot of people are that the quarterback is the most valuable player on the team, which I understand, but there's a lot on this team. And Jerry mentioned Penny Sewell. I would say he's the best tackle in the NFL, I think, and the best right tackle for sure in this league. How many teams do you see that pull their right tackle as much as the Detroit Lions do?
Or send them out to do a pass or something like that. You're right. And
Yeah.
Coach said it. The offensive line drives the entire offense.
Yeah, and just the freak of nature that he is at right tackle allows them to do things that a lot of offenses couldn't, just because of the things that he can do. He can maul you on one play and just take a defensive end and destroy him on one play, and you can pull him and have him take somebody out on the left side of the line in the next. And you never know what the Lions are going to do from play to play because Penny Sewell can do everything on an offensive line.
That is for certain. When the Lions drafted him, they took him because a receiver went in front and he fell. And, everybody likes the receiver, but I'll be honest, and normally I probably would too. But when Sewell was there, I was elated because I had a feeling of what it could mean to the team. And so yeah, those are some impressive things. James, you wanted to touch about on just the defensive side though as well. You thought there were some huge impacts there.
Yeah, you alluded to Aleem. The another guy I'm going to say is Carlton Davis the third because I think he changed him and Terry Arnold, who we already talked about. The fact that they had two man-to-man sticky corners that they could just put those corners on an island on a team's number 1 and 2 receivers, and then have 9 defenders for Aaron Glenn to choose what he wanted to do with. Uh, that gives so much versatility and scheme versatility, allowed some of those blitz packages that they were able to do from time to time that they just sprung on teams and or play zone sometimes, just do all kinds of different things. So having two just man-to-man sticky corners most of the season was massive for that defense, and what Aaron Glenn was able to pull together on that defense despite so many injuries elsewhere.
Well, yeah, and even starting on early, it meant you had a seasoned veteran in there at that number 1 spot, and without having to put 2 rookies out there right away. And so therefore, Terry Arnold could make some mistakes and could grow and wasn't always going to be tasked with that toughest assignment. That trade in the offseason really helped the Lions get to where they want, and it'll be interesting to see if Carlton Davis is part of the future or not, or what that looks like this offseason. But before that, Coach, biggest surprise of the season. I'm going to go with, it's probably the obvious one, and I'm going with Jake Bates. Because even though there was hype around him in the offseason going into training camp, sometimes that hype is just a feel-good story. We remember John Parker Romo, right, from a couple of years back, and he had a great leg. But it went from, that was one of the first injuries, right? Michael Badgley going down, and now you got to rely on Jake Bates. And I'm going to say he exceeded expectations by far because not only did he have the leg strength, but he had the accuracy as well, and he showed that throughout a lot of it, Coach. Is he one of your candidates? You have other people? What are you thinking for that?
Oh, I think definitely with Jake Bates, and again, I'm going to go back to JMO. He went above. We knew what he had, but when he was catching those balls across the middle early and stuff was a huge one for me. I think that was, just that, oh my God, and then you got to tie in with that Tim Patrick, again, those couple pieces that fit in that kind of fit into what the missing pieces or the missing links. And those are the ones that put the puzzle together for the offense.
Yeah, well, so let's weigh in on those couple things right there. One, the Tim Patrick thing, that was huge. That was that component that going into the regular season almost, we're like, well, we still don't know if we have a third receiver. Khalif Raymond, different situation, of course, but a taller guy who could be a red zone threat or just a taller threat. And so Tim Patrick was a nice surprise. And, Jake Bates, 89.7% field goals. He was 6 for 8 on field goals over 50 yards, including a 58-yarder. It really changed what this coaching staff could do, James. And so that's where I put him up there as a big surprise. I'm going to agree with Coach, though. JMO, that is a surprise because until you get it done, you can't say it's going to happen. But what do you got here, James?
Yeah, I think both of those are good choices. I'm going to go with Kevin Zeitler. I think he was better than expected, and I expected him to be good, and he was even better. than what we thought. Coming in, some people were wondering if he was too old. He was close to the 30-year-old, and everything. But offensive linemen don't drop off like that, like wide receivers or running backs do at that age. So, but he was just a great addition to this offensive line. Just
And and you know what?
steady, mean, everything they wanted.
And you know what? He might have actually helped make this offensive line better than it was a year ago. I mean, with exactly what you just talked about there.
Yeah, and he just plugged that hole. They didn't miss a beat at that spot. So yeah, I think that was pretty good. With other ones that I have, to a lesser extent, Trevor Nowaski really stepped up this year. Turned himself, I think, into an every down linebacker that they can put in whatever situation they need to put him in down the road. Showed he can pretty much handle it all. Levi came through and had a pretty solid season this year. Battled some injuries again, but when he was healthy, he was a pretty impactful defensive tackle. Mekhi Wingo, same thing before he got hurt. Another one of those 6th-round picks who's paid off for Brad Holmes, and Christian Mahogany, another 6th-round pick who, when they needed to play him, really came through and kind of shined. And I'm going to go back to. I saw somebody post a Twitter poll, I think it was, and they said, should we re-sign Kindle Vildor?" And the Twitter hate on Kindle Vildor was amazing. A little disappointing because it was like one of those, like, tell me you didn't really know what was going on defense without telling me you didn't really know what was going on in defense. Because Kindle Vildor was pretty darn solid down the stretch for the Lions this year. I think that he's a guy that they'll re-sign because he'll be pretty affordable and is a good, reliable backup.
Coach, can you weigh in on that a minute? Because I tell you, James is right. He gets a lot of hate. There's been a few plays that didn't work out, but I tell you, I was happy they re-signed him this year, and I hope they bring him back. What did you see?
I same thing. I see that with Vildor. I think he comes in and does what he's supposed to. He gave up that. We talked about that after that one. He was 1-7 or whatever receptions where they hit. He got hit big, but he had the big breakup in the last game or second last game. He does what he's supposed to do. He's not a number one corner. He's not a number two corner. He's a sub guy, and he's a guy that the team likes, and the coaches respond to him, and the coaches believe in him, and he's a great backup. The guy's been a starter. We're not going to find anybody else better than him unless we're going to pay, $15 million for him, and that's not then you got to get a starter. So what are we going to do? We're going to bench the other guy. So yeah, I think there's a ton of hate on that. Two other, can I tell? I want to touch base on a couple other ones that James talked about.
Yeah.
Levi and Pascal. Okay.
Oh.
Pascal's another one. Levi came back from that injury. Levi had a bad back. Levi was a 2nd-round draft pick. Did Levi hold up to where his draft pick was? Here's the other thing. We got to remember, those two guys bounced around on the defensive line all year because of injuries. They weren't geared. Levi was geared to be that outside Sam Rush DN type guy opposite Hutch with Davenport, or move into inside. So I think those are a couple guys too that fit the mold that we want, and still their numbers weren't eye popping, but what would their numbers have been if that number 97 would have been on one end and Davenport would have been on the other? The numbers would have exploded, and McNeil would have played all year. They would explode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I think those are, there's a lot of good out of this. A lot of good out of this.
There definitely is. Now, James, we talked about the guys that were the biggest surprises. Is there anybody that you were hoping? I think you've got some people in here you're hoping to see a little bit more from this year that maybe you didn't see as much from.
Yeah, a couple of guys that were kind of disappointments. I think Broderick Martin was one. I thought that he would be somebody, especially with all those injuries, that would be able to find his way into the lineup, and never really did. Especially somebody who was a 3rd-round pick not too long ago. So I had some expectations there. He looked okay in the preseason, I thought, and then just could never find his way on the field consistently, which was just disappointing considering that the opportunity was there for him. So Graham Glasgow had, I think, an off season. I think he was playing through some injuries that he maybe didn't talk about and stuff, but he was not nearly as good as he was last year. So I still think that they'll bring him back to compete somewhere. But And then Brock Wright kind of really disappeared. He wasn't as much of a piece of the offense. His blocking was okay, but he had a few missed assignments here and there. And I kind of, with the contract that they gave him in the offseason, I kind of expected a little bit more. James Houston, obviously a big one. That we were hoping for that bounce back season, and it did not come. He had that one promising game and then just kind of fell off a cliff after that.
Yeah, I would echo some of those. Some previous draft picks, Kobe Sorsdale, Broderick Martin. Next year will be really telling for both of those guys because that's going into year 3 for each of them. And they weren't expected to start right away, but you were hoping to maybe, with all the injuries, to see Broderick Martin maybe have an impact this year. But this offseason will be big for them. And, out of this year's rookie class, the second draft pick, Rakestraw, he had injuries. And so it'll be, I'm excited to see him next year. So I kind of put the injury thing as why that kind of happened. But yeah, so those will be some things there. And back to that other, the promising, the guys who improved. Trevor Nowatzki improving is big because he's a depth linebacker, and it just gives your depth that much more stability as the season goes on for next year. Coach, anything you were looking for more of, or any disappointments you from this past season from anybody?
Well, I think, I thought Broderick Martin was a big one. We talked about it every week, Well, Martin's going to break. He's going to have a game today. And then he just never got on the field. And, again, we got, we're missing Pat O'Connor, right? Pat O'Connor, who played a ton, and then who was the other D tackle that seemed to just keep stepping over him. But those were also veteran guys, that, could get into the big party a little bit more, understand things a little bit more and in the magnitude. And maybe Broderick just has to do that. And he was limited to start because of injuries. And again, that's you're 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks into a season with your playbook in hand. And now all of a sudden you got to jump over these guys that have been doing this. He had a tough go. And so, yeah, look, hopefully he has a breakout year next year.
All right. Well, let's talk about what we're going to remember most about this season, guys. Coach, I'll start with you. What do you remember most about this year?
I think the four players, 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers with 1,000 scrimmage yards. The number of times that Gibbs, Saint, and JMO scored. How many games in a row was that? I can't remember. There was like 8 games in a row where the 3 of them all scored a touchdown. There's so much, guys. That you guys would hit those records every week, and I'm like, God, stop! You're spinning my head. I don't want to hear that right now. So, and I just think, I think that's the biggest thing. We won 15 games. And we can go on and on. And again, I got a little thing at the end. I want to kind of summed it all up.
All right, sounds good. James, how about you?
We've already talked about the injuries, but the counter to that coin was the offense just picking it up and carrying this team to 15 wins this season. Just such a dynamic offense, weapons everywhere. Ben Johnson, obviously great imaginative play caller, trick plays up the wazoo. It just had teams guessing all the time and usually guessing wrong. So that offense, and I'm hoping that continues next year. Minus Ben Johnson, they'll have pretty much everything back on offense next year. So the offense still should be one of the strengths of the team, and hopefully a healthier defense next year.
All right, yeah, the things I'm going to remember, Coach alluded to it. The Lions were rewriting the offensive record books, it seemed, almost every week. I think the Lions PR group was sending out so many tweets. James and I couldn't keep track of them, Coach. The ones that we bombarded you with, that was probably only like 65 or 70% of the ones that got set out because there were so many things happening. I want to say back-to-back division titles, man. Like, we hadn't won the NFC North ever until last year, and now we've done it back-to-back. And so those things, as we talked about, week 1, week 18, those bookends of the season, the Dallas Cowboys win. Those were just so many great things that happened this year and so many incredible memories in between. And I want to talk about the FUN we had. There was so much fun and creativity. That offense, We didn't mention all the interceptions by the defense, but goodness, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, they were incredible back there. It was a lot of fun. Another thing that was fun is I was able to speak with Dan Miller, Fox 2 sports director, and talk to him about this season and some of the impacts it had on him and get some of his insights. So we're going to play that interview here, and then James, Coach, and I are going to come back and wrap this thing up. Joining me today is Dan Miller. He is the Fox 2 Detroit sports director. He's the voice of the Detroit Lions doing radio play-by-play and brings fans numerous insights in many different facets with the Detroit Lions throughout the year. Dan, thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Dan, 15 wins this year, the most in franchise history. Let's just start with that right now. Did you have a preseason record prediction for this team? Do you do stuff like that?
No, because nobody wants to hear it. It's if you're in my position, if you say the team's going to win, then you're a homer. If you say they're going to lose, then people are angry with you. So, no, I mean, look, I thought they had a very good chance, if not to be the favorite to win the NFC North. I didn't see Minnesota having the season that they had. Credit to them. They did. They had a heck of a year. And I just thought the Lions probably had the least questions going into this season. So I thought they'd win the division, but I didn't know what that would look like. I probably thought that would be in the area of 12, 13, something like that, right about where they were last year. But 15 was obviously, that's a heck of a run.
That it is. Is there anything you learned about this team this year that you didn't already know?
I mean, look, we're obviously dividing this into really good regular season, disappointing playoff game. But if there's anything I learned, it's that they have the ability to adapt. I mean, the injuries that this team was able to endure during the regular season and still keep it going, still find a way to win was pretty stunning. I don't think many people have seen attrition on one side of the ball like this team suffered this year. So it was significant. It was at times stunning. Obviously, it was heartbreaking to see some of these guys go down, knowing how hard they worked to put themselves in position to have an opportunity like this. But I just think it's another example of what a Dan Campbell team is able to do. And that's just find a way to win. And I think that's what he always preaches. I think that's what he gets his teams ready to do. And more often than not during the regular season, that's what you saw, was that they just figured out a way. Sometimes it was offense, sometimes it was defense, sometimes it was special teams, but just find a way on whatever given day it is to get that win.
That makes sense. That might even answer my next question, which is, is there something that surprised you or impressed you the most this season about the team? Was it overcoming all those injuries on defense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was just, when Ayton went down, we all thought, well, this is going to be trouble now. How are they going to endure this? And that was just the beginning. I mean, you also had Barnes, and then you have Aleem, and then you lost your two best defensive linemen, your best cornerback, three of your top four linebackers for much of the season. So it was just difficult to watch things fall apart. And even, Melifonwu, who played a big role at the end of last year, and they certainly had him pegged for a role this year, missing most of the season before coming back late in the year. So, and then Davenport, different guys that were expected to take snaps for him. It was just, there's no way you could expect that. So when it comes to most surprising, that would have to be it.
All right. Well, again, even with that, they still won the NFC North, back-to-back division champs. Do you have a favorite memory from this season or favorite moment or two that stick out?
Man, probably, the win at Minnesota is always big. It's a great place to play. The fans there are great. And getting a win there when they had fallen behind on the scoop and score late in that game, and watching them come back and then win. And, the Houston game was crazy. It was one of those what the heck just happened games when you have all those turnovers and you find a way to win. And then closing with the win at against Minnesota at Ford Field with everything on the line. Final game of the regular season against the team that had a terrific year itself, and then putting in the kind of effort they did. And obviously, Sam Darnold did not have a great night that night, and that certainly helped him. But the defense played a heck of a game, and the offense, did a nice job, overcame a couple of turnovers. So probably those stick out. Going to Dallas and putting up that kind of win was pretty incredible as well. beating Dallas is always beating Dallas, and it always will be. And there's something I think any player would tell you. You grow up, those stars on the helmet mean something, and going in there and just running them out of their own house like we did was pretty incredible.
Yeah, I put down as one of my favorite things because for years I've been sitting here saying, why do we keep having to go to Dallas and play? Why can't they come to Detroit? They're finally going to come next year, and they're going to look a little different than they have the last couple of years. But that, putting 50 points on them, that was a phenomenal game for the things that did go well there.
It's just, look, it's a place to play where you kind of circle and take note because that building is spectacular. The Cowboys are the Cowboys, even if they had a tough year. And it's just, look, you grow up hearing about them all the time, and they're just, whether or not you want to consider them America's team, whatever they are, they consider themselves that. So it's always enjoyable when you get a chance to beat them.
That it is. And the fans got to see such an impressive display on the field with all the plays by the players, but obviously heavily influencing those guys is a coaching staff. Is there any insight that you can talk about with this coaching staff and give a little insight to the fans about how incredible they are or how they're separated from maybe previous coaching staffs that have been here?
Well, I think where they separate themselves from previous coaching staffs, I believe, is in the development. The fact that when players come in here, they get better. The fact that when players come in here, they learn what it is to play in the National Football League, because guys don't know when they show up. I mean, they may be great college players, but this is a whole different world that requires a whole different type of dedication and style of play and learning what it is to be an NFL player. And look, this organization has done two things incredibly well. They've drafted and they've developed. And you have to have those things if you're going to be a winning organization. You have to have those things if you're going to have any kind of staying power as a winning team. So I just think that's what stands out to me. And when it comes to the coaching staff, look, it starts with Dan Campbell, and it is his ability to get guys ready to play. And again, I understand I'm saying this on the heels of a really disappointing playoff loss, but overall, I think really the kind of secret sauce to Dan Campbell's ability is getting a team ready to play on a weekly basis. And I think look no further than the fact that, this team has not lost 2 games in a row since October 2022. No other team in the NFL is even close to that. And that says he doesn't let them stay down for long. He gets them ready to play on a weekly basis. And I just think guys in this organization want to play well for him. They don't want to let him down. And I think, Chris Spielman said this at an event I was at. It permeates the entire organization that there is a responsibility that you feel when you're part of it, that you don't want to let the guy next to you down, regardless of if you're a football player, a football coach, somebody who works in one of the departments over there, whatever it is, there's just a cohesion there that they've kind of brought about in this culture where people want to do their best. They don't want to let each other down, and they truly care.
That makes a lot of sense. And you talk about the player development part of it. Is there a player or two that you saw specifically that jumped out to you that maybe was most improved on the field this year?
I mean, this team, look, they're loaded. If you look at that depth chart, they are loaded with talent right now. And I think, obviously a guy like Kirby Joseph sticks out. Jack Campbell was much better this year than he was last year. Even a guy like Christian Mahogany, who comes in and has a couple of starts and doesn't have training camp at all, to see the job that he did. Jamo expanding his game this year and his route tree and getting to 1,000 yards, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who I maintain isn't just one of the best running backs in this league. He's one of the best players in this league. And Goff putting up the numbers that he did. He was just outstanding this year. Go to Jack Fox, man. The guy's putting up historic numbers as a punter that literally put him among the greatest of all time. And, Dave Phipp does a great job with the special teams. So, I don't want to leave anybody out because, like I said, if you look up and down this roster, it's loaded. I mean, they have a ton of talent and a ton of young talent and a ton of talent that's going to be here next year when they come back and, try to get this thing right. But that's a byproduct of what we talked about before, which is just that drafting and developing where you're constantly adding. And then you look down at your depth chart, and you're like, we're pretty good here. And that's, I would say winning and losing aren't that different. It's the decisions you make. And if you make enough bad decisions, you look down at your depth chart and your results and you say, made a lot of mistakes and we're not very good. If you make good decisions, it's when you look down at your depth chart and you say, you know what? We're well stocked, we're pretty good, and we're seeing the fruits of our labor here. And I think that's where the Lions are. And again, I because I know people are out there kind of shaking their head. I understand the caveat that was brutal the way this season ended, but it really doesn't erase where they have the opportunity, if they take advantage of it, to go from here, because they will come back with a ton of talent, and they will come back, I think, with more talent than we even see right now, because they will add to the mix with, free agency, trades, draft, whatever it takes, and try to fill in some of the holes that they have.
Yeah, you're right. There were so many great moments this year, and there's so much coming back. Let me ask you, game day broadcast, your co-host on broadcast, Lomas Brown. He's got to be one of the nicest guys I've ever met. He's just so kind. Is there a fun moment that you guys and your crew had during the season that might stick out, just a fun little moment or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, look, I all of them. I mean, I'm lucky. I get to go to work with guys that I'd want to hang out with anyway, and Lomas and TJ, and they're just people that and I was lucky enough to do it with Brandy for a number of years. So I mean, it's some of the best times we have are Saturday night going out to dinner and just joking and laughing and telling stories, more their stories than my stories, but just having fun with people that you enjoy. Then you get to go spend 3 or 4 hours on Sunday with them. And that's fun. And, giving Lomas grief for ordering salads when we go out. So it's all, kind of living a dream, something you always wanted to do. And then to be able to do it with people that you enjoy like that is pretty incredible.
For sure. Well, I, again, like you, saw this team go to new heights at 15-2. And, it didn't end the way people wanted it to, but we're in a different, stratosphere, it seems like, with this organization right now. I know we're only 9 days removed from the season, but, can you reflect? Is it early? Is enough time removed? How will you look back, or how do you look back at the 2024 season as a whole?
Oh, man. I mean, obviously there were some good things, and you can't take that away. And these guys worked their tails off for what they got, to win another division title, to have home field advantage and the number 1 seed in the North. But look, the way that ended is going to stick with people for a long time. And you did everything you wanted to do. Won the division, got the top seed, had 2 games instead of 3, and they were both on your field. And then they just came out and played in a way that we're not used to seeing them play. They're not a team that beats itself very often. And on that day, they did. You can't turn the ball over 5 times and expect to win a playoff game. And it was crazy that, Washington went out the next week and fell apart and basically did the same thing the Lions did. You're suddenly 2 scores behind. You're turning the ball over. You're trying to catch up. You're frenetically moving the ball up and down the field. I mean, look, the Lions scored 31 with 5 turnovers. And if they don't turn the ball over, if they just, Dan Campbell said, if they just have a B day, they probably score 50. I mean, that's how good this team is offensively. But just as good as you are, you can very quickly equalize all that with turnovers. And it is the number 1 indicator of winning and losing in the NFL, turning the ball over. And in that critical category, they just fell apart against Washington. And there's all sorts of different reasons for that. It's not one thing or one person that you can put your, finger on, but it was just a really bad game at a really bad time. And you go into every week in the NFL talking about stopping the run, winning the playoff battle, and they didn't stop the run, and the turnover battle, and they didn't win the turnover battle. So, that's how I look at that last game. And yeah, that casts a shadow over the season. It doesn't mean that you didn't accomplish some things, but you didn't accomplish what you set out to accomplish, which was to finally be that team that got to the Super Bowl. It was set up for you, but very quickly, again, you learn the hard lesson that in this league, anybody can beat anybody. And in particular, if you're making it easy on the other team. And I don't want to take anything away from Washington, because every mistake the Lions made, they took advantage of it, just like Philadelphia did against Washington in the next round. So it's the way this game kind of goes. You give another team the opportunity. What do they do with it? Washington took advantage of it.
And is it possible that that is one more lesson, the Lions have learned? They had the NFC Championship game a year ago out in San Francisco, that they knew what it felt like to not advance when they had it there. And now they know what it's like to be the heavily favored team. And so if that happens again next year, is there something they can learn from this past season?
I think there's something you learn from everything. But I mean, I think the thing is, I don't think anything happened in that game that they didn't already know. They know that in this league, you can't expect to win when you play like that. You can't expect to win when you turn the ball over like that. So, I think there's a certain amount of pain that drives you. But that's kind of where they were this year. So they're not unlike a lot of teams that knock on the door and get knocked back, and knock on the door and get knocked back, and you just got to keep knocking. You don't have any other alternative. You have to try to find a way to fight through. And next time, don't play that way. Play the way you played to get to 15 wins. You play that way, you win the game. They're better than Washington. I still think they're the better team. But if you don't play that way on a given day, that's what this league does. This league will knock you back. So it's a harsh lesson, but it is one that you can either learn from or you don't, and you're doomed to repeat it. It's as the saying goes. So I don't think there was any great revelations. I think they'd just tell you that they played in a way that they understand as professionals. You can't play and win.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, it unfortunately does cast a little bit of a shadow on all those regular season accomplishments, because it was a fun, great, exciting season. Once again, that was Dan Miller, Fox 2 sports director and voice of the Detroit Lions. Now, that's part one of our interview. We'll have the rest of it in the next episode when we talk about coaching changes and start looking forward to 2025. Before we get out of here, any final thoughts you have on the 2024 season? James, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the best thing is, I know that a lot of people are down right now that the season didn't end the way they wanted to, but I think one of the bigger takeaways for this season is the Detroit Lions are for real. The last season was not a fluke at all. They did everything they did that season plus more, with more injuries. So this window is not shut by any means. So I think that you're going to see the Detroit Lions next year just continue to get better. I don't know how you can do better than 15-2, but obviously the playoffs it can be the spot where you get better than that. But a lot of people are down now, but man, there's more to come. The Detroit Lions showed that they are one of the prime franchises in the NFL, and that they are here to stay.
That is a big shift from past realities there, James Cook. Coach, what do you got?
Well, the last loss seems to have hit a lot of fans harder than it did the Lions. They were down as much as we were, but some of the social media stuff, they realize, we have to realize what accomplished 15-2 was, with the many injuries on defense we had. The injuries and the turnovers was eventually going to catch up to them. And it did against Washington. I mean, that's, it's part of the game. The players and coaches will use it for an extreme amount of motivation. I am still upset with the loss, which you are, which I'm sure the Lions are. Probably will not shake it until our first game next year, or at least OTAs. If I was coaching, it would fuel me for the offseason, but I'm not able to go out there and coach nor motivate the guys. So we as fans need to realize the Lions are in uncharted territory. Success we have never experienced, being Lions fans for life. What this team had to experience with all the injuries, guys walking off the streets to fill a role. This team, players and staff, continue to win and continue to put a smile, and I say a big smile, on our face every week. Break records, win the division, most wins in a season, earn the number one seed. Never did you hear excuses. Only we will be ready. Yes, it caught up to us all the way up to our last game in the playoffs. Second play into the playoff game, we lost the player who had the best game of his career a week earlier, playing a position he didn't start the season playing, crying at his press conference about how much this team and coaching staff means to him. Next man up. This team is not going anywhere but up with these guys, all these young and coming back, and they will be very angry when they get here. 1-0.
Coach Angers, thank you for those words of wisdom and that perspective. Now, guys, it's been a memorable season, right? With multiple high points and definitely some heartache as well. That playoff loss, it stung more than I think I was willing to admit to most people. It definitely hurt. That said, though, I think our passion for this team was obvious to the listeners. Greatly appreciate, Coach, all the insights you brought, all the film breakdown you did. James, that journalistic deep dive of research you did and brought to this show as well. Thank you guys for that. Folks, thank you. That is our wrap on the 2024 season. You might not believe it, but this was year 4 of Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, and company. And you know what they say about time? It flies when you're having fun. We sincerely hope that you've had as much fun as we did this season. So thank you so much for checking us out, for coming back, for tuning in, for telling people about the show. You know where you can find more episodes and content. That's at notthesameoldlions.com. Please find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and the likes. Like and comment, subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.